of the zoning,
Excuse me.
it's okay, the zoning commission of the town of Caroline. We're going to start with privilege of the floor. It's an opportunity for individuals to provide input to the zoning commission. Speakers will have up to 3 minutes, subject to modification depending upon time constraints. Like, you know, if we had 92 people here wanting to do privilege of the floor, we would do something else. Each resident is provided one speaking opportunity per meeting. Written input is also welcome. Is there anyone who would like to address the zoning commission? Peter. And Ellen, great. So you'll be second, Ellen. Peter, we will start with you. And please give your name and your address because it should be in the record.
Sure, gentleman over here would like
Sorry, didn't see you. You'll be third.
to. Yeah, my name is Peter Hoyt and I live right around the corner on Pringley Road. Brookendale Post Office, but my body and my soul is in Pringley. Are you on the zoning commission? I don't think I know you.
I'll be joining him. I'm Patrick Robert. I'm a new member of the planning board.
Oh, okay, and I recognize the lady there front and center, I think. I can't even, hey, Michelle, I know you. So what I want to say, and this is primarily to the consultants, but also to the people on the zoning commission. There are an awful lot of people in the town of Caroline who don't want zoning, and I wish more of them would come and speak at these kinds of meetings. It just doesn't seem to be happening, and there's a perception out there that some people share that it doesn't do any good to speak up. But I actually don't share that. I mean, if you don't take a chance and speak up, you're doomed anyway, you know, so you might as well go for it. So a couple of things. I would like to urge this commission to consider holding a public hearing specifically to hear what people have to say and would mainly be attracting the people who are opposed to zoning, because I don't know if all of you, especially the consultants, are getting much of an ear of that. And I'd also want to urge the consultants to get out in the community and talk to people. I mean, I'll talk to anybody anytime, but there's a lot more than just me. And try to pick up the other side of the story on this. There are many of us who feel that zoning is not necessary in this town. Many of us feel that it's an infringement on our property rights. We also feel that it's a huge expense the town is taking on, and not just for the initial review that you're all doing now, but once it's in place, there's going to be more bureaucracy. There's going to be more salaries out there. I guess I'd like to hear all this stuff discussed. I mean, I get the impression that the commission is open-minded and the consultants are open-minded. But if you don't hear from people who have an opposing point of view, you're not going to be as aware of it. So my general urging is to get out and talk to more people like me, even maybe cultivators, but I'll certainly come forward anytime. And second, maybe to hold a specific hearing advertised just for that purpose, so that more people might feel comfortable coming and registering their opposition.
You've got about 30 seconds, Peter.
I will yield to the chair.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Is that what they say?
That's good. And Peter, please do me a favor and cover your nose and mouth. I'm personally a little terrified of the breakthrough viruses. So
Yeah, well, it's hard to talk.
I know exactly. I can't even hear. I feel like I can't hear when I have this thing on either. So thank you. Ellen Harrison is next.
Ellen Harrison, 2050 Ellis Hollow Road. Thank you all for what you're doing. I sent a question to the town clerk and asked it to be distributed to all of the members. Did you guys get it?
No, I didn't.
So how, if I do have things, how am I supposed to communicate it? I did send it to the clerk.
Ellen, on the website, on the zoning commission page is my email, which is jeanmcfeeters@gmail.com. And you can always send something there and I will distribute it to people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope that wasn't part of my 30 seconds. Um, The question that I sent in was, why do the consultants think that there needs to be an area for large commercial? So that was discussed when the various scenarios were presented at a meeting, maybe 2 meetings ago or the meeting before. And the statement was made, I think by Nan, that, here's the area where there should be large commercial. And it seemed as though the assumption was that the town wanted someplace for large commercial. And personally, I don't believe that's what the comp plan is suggesting. And I don't think large commercial has a place in this town. So I would like that to be noted and that to be discussed when you're reviewing commercial development. The other sort of similar was there's an industrial zone that was shown on a number of those scenarios. I can't remember whether it was all of them or which of them. And that was, I think, where the quarry is now,
Mhm.
which is an industrial use. My question to the board is, as we consider, do we want to allow other industrial uses? Personally, I don't really think so. But again, that's something for the commission to consider, but you don't have to make an industrial zone where the quarry is. You can grandfather them in as an existing use or potentially describe right on it. But I truly don't believe that we want industry in this town. That's not the picture I see. And I guess I could imagine, I don't know what it would be considered if on the Snow farm they are producing yogurt. Is that an industrial use? I don't know. And those kinds of uses make sense to me, but I think a broad scale industrial is not what we want. So those are the main 2 points. The other is, and I'll probably raise it again another time, has to do with view. And as I recollect in what's being reviewed, the view question is generally addressed as, how do we preserve what you're looking at? And I think that's important. But to me, I drive in 79, most of us do, right? And the view down the Wilseyville Valley is very special. And yes, the view, the hills, whatever, but you have to be able to see it. And so development along 79, I mean, frankly, it's a damn shame that there's in my view, the very unattractive storage, Ideal Storage or whoever storage it is. And things like that, if they're in the forescape, essentially ruin that view. And so I would like the board to be thinking about, as they think about views, not only what you're looking at, but how do you look? How
About
do you,
20 seconds.
but what do you see in order to see that view? That's my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, I guess I should say. My name is Barry Goodrich, and I reside at 2851 Slaterville Road, just east of the Slaterville hamlet here. I graduated from Cornell University in 1962 as an ag engineer, which is kind of a crossbreed between a civil engineer and a mechanical engineer with an agricultural flavor. I'm a member of the Town of Caroline Watershed Committee since its inception back in 2005, I believe. I'm a member of the Tompkins County Water Resources Council, which is an advisory board to the county legislature on all matters doing with water. I'm a representative to the town of Caroline, to the Stormwater Coalition. which is part of the Tompkins County Soil and Water Conservation District. And I am a qualified erosion and sediment control person who advises on all land disturbances in the town of Caroline of a half acre or more. Why I'm getting up here is because when I was reading over the draft minutes of the last meeting, and came down here to number 9B, which says DEC does not have much control over water and water quality, as the public often thinks they do. This is an area that I think zoning can contribute to. Well, that upsets me because I don't think zoning can contribute a darn thing to it. I just told you some of the organizations that I'm involved with. Here is a list of 60 organizations that are organizations that influence water resources in Tompkins County. 60 of them. Of those, 14 are regulatory. They tell you what you can do or what you can't do. And so the DEC is just one of them. The Ag and Markets is another one. The EPA is another one. The Health Department is another one. Of those 14, I just named 4. So I guess that's the crux of my being here, is that I think that there are plenty of people in the town of Caroline that can advise this board on zoning things before they even fulfill the document. So I'll stop my comments right there.
Thank you, Mr. Goodrich. Patrick.
Good evening, everyone. Patrick Braga, I'm an urban planner and a classical composer living in Caroline and working primarily in Ithaca. I've been giving some different thoughts to the 4 different options that the consultants have been presenting. And in general, I tend to lean in favor towards the zoning options that have less minute control over specific distribution of land uses and leave more up essentially to the creativity of property owners. When I heard, for instance, a little bit of the discussion at the last meeting about multi-unit housing and whether that might be something that should be controlled by zoning, you know, that level of detail of number of units, dimensions of buildings, that makes sense in heavily populated areas, even a place like Ithaca, because there's public infrastructure like water, sewer, and roads that will be more directly impacted by that. In a place like Caroline, where there's less water, there is no municipal water and sewer, where roads are extremely under capacity, I wonder whether perhaps maybe a direction like option 2 is the best, where essentially most of the town remains unzoned, and if the residents of the hamlets wish for them to be zoned, that would be a direction. But I wonder if we could explore performance zoning or performance ordinances as a way to implement land use planning without the strictures of zoning, which, like the first speaker said, does come with kind of the bureaucratic side of having to have town staff to enforce and review and make sure that the BZA is following its precautions. So I wonder whether, for instance, noise, odor, light ordinances, water impact ordinances might achieve the same types of outcomes that it sounds like the town as a community wants to see through zoning without kind of the state imposed regulatory strictures that come with it. And in the case of residential development, like I said, I mean, if we think about Caroline within the context of Tompkins County as having about 3% of the county population, the county in 2016 published a housing needs assessment. I got thinking, what might it take for Caroline to meet its proportional contribution to housing production in Tompkins County, which, like with 3% as an estimate, would be about 50 new apartments in the city by 2025 and accommodating 10 new detached houses per year until 2026. And I wonder whether, even absent zoning, we can think about those goals really dynamically. For instance, if we have a hamlet zone defined, maybe saying that until a certain number of residential permits are issued within the hamlet zones, the number of residential permits elsewhere in the town will be capped to encourage cluster development where existing residential development is. And I think my last point in terms of the question of rural character as well is something that I've been thinking about. Professionally, I tend to avoid the term neighborhood character or character in urban planning because it's one of the most imprecise terms in the profession. I like to break down character into the parts of prevailing physical features of buildings, prevailing natural and open space features, prevailing socioeconomic characteristics of the community, which hasn't really come up very much in the discussion yet. And then also, what was the last category? Behavior in public or within public view, which I categorize as what people think of the term land use. So activities, what it entails commercial activity versus residential versus agricultural cultivation. So I think if we think of at that granular detail, I think we'll have a more specific direction about whether zoning or performance zoning or another direction might be the best way to land use plan.
Thank you, Patrick. Is there anyone else who wants to speak under privilege of the floor? Seeing none, I am going to move ahead to the approval of the minutes of the July 27th meeting. Does anyone have any? I'm sorry, I had a blank in there because I did not know who that was who was speaking. The first speaker in the privilege of the floor the last time.
Oh, the last time?
I just didn't know his name and I didn't ask him for it.
It was Ken Miller or Ron Spade.
Oh, yeah. First it was Ken, then it was Ron.
Okay, I think that's right. That's what I had. Okay, I will make those changes. If there's any other change, I will, I'll make that change and then I will get these to Velvet. Would anyone like to move these? Thank you.
Second.
Excellent. Okay. All in favor, please say aye or wave your hand wildly.
Aye.
Michelle, wave your hand wildly. Thank you. Excellent. And I'm waving my hand wildly, so that is approved. Tim, could you give us a report from the town council?
Hi, everybody. I think first I'll just mention, because it came up in an email this week, that the supervisor does distribute a quarterly newsletter. And the meetings of the zoning commission have been announced broadly in the newsletter. Apparently I think it was Bruce who hadn't gotten one. And I've been in touch with Jesse and just verified how it's gone out and who's gotten it. I also just might mention something that I forgot to mention last week, which is a kind of an interesting fact. Mark and I had our quarterly meeting with the code enforcement officer, Caroline. And one of his responsibilities is to designate new addresses when they're requested for new builds. And he reported to us that he's received up to 30 new addresses pretty much in the past quarter. It wasn't specific, but Mark and I were really actually very impressed by that figure. And that could be all kinds of different things. It could be people intending to subdivide their land. It's probably some housing starts. But what it indicated to us was that there is current movement happening in the town of Caroline, which I think would be of interest to the zoning commission. And I think just the last thing I'd mention for the public, since I'm the board liaison to the zoning commission, is we do have a very, very firm masking requirement in the town hall, and we very, very much appreciate even speakers continuing to wear their mask when they're speaking, which is something we've discussed in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. The planning board, Val is not here this evening. Patrick, is there any, you want to tell us where you are on the battery thing?
Yeah,
I mean, and Patrick, you're welcome to go ahead. You probably have those.
Yeah, Bill.
Bill's for longer than.
No, we'll let. Okay. All right, Patrick, you want to do it or you want me to do it?
No, please, you've been doing the battery project longer than I have.
Okay.
Bill, I'm sorry, you were on a different screen, so I didn't see you. And
Yeah,
I
well,
have a cataract and I can't read anything tonight.
Oh
So,
dear. Sorry to hear that.
Me too.
So indeed, we're in the final stages of a battery energy storage system siting law. We've made it all the way through the entire law at our last meeting, dealt with most of the issues, had a set of topics to address that were divvied up among members, and I got feedback on those this week. So a new draft was sent out today, and we expect to finish that draft on Thursday's meeting. It won't be completely done because there's always some proofreading and things like that to tweak. But basically, we will be done after Thursday's meeting as far as the planning board meeting on it. So as of this Thursday, the planning board will go into hibernation and instead become part of the zoning commission.
Excellent. I see applause. There's applause happening. Well, good. So then we will welcome you as full participants in the next meeting. Because I think the way the town board did it is, it was like, yeah, so it's,
That's correct.
okay,
Yes.
so then you become official. Okay,
And I don't know what you're planning this meeting, Gene. You know, when it comes to talking about public participation plan, I would appreciate the ability to contribute some thoughts, but you know, you're in charge, so.
yeah, I'm trying, I think at this meeting, I'm going to try very hard not to, but I will, if we sort of have a lot of time at the end, we'll see about that.
Okay,
Thank you. Nan had sent us a proposed public participation initiative outline. So Nan, you want to go through this for us?
Sure.
Thank
Did you want me to put it up and share the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And I will say to everyone, what I'd like to do tonight is hear what this is, get some input from people on the board, think about if there are changes that we want to make, and then perhaps at the next meeting, after people have had time to mull it, adopt this as our plan, or whatever, with whatever changes we make.
So, you know, this was just some ideas. There's nothing set in stone. I did start off with these 4 items were the ones that were asked for in the proposal that the town board had put out when we originally responded, and specifically requested for public meetings. And this was kind of our way of responding to this. So these 4 items are part of the contract that we signed with the town. Although if those items don't really work, I'm happy to be flexible and change them in a way that makes sense. But the idea behind these were that this first meeting was a little further than you are now, but not so far down the road that the public feels everything is a done deal. We don't want that to be, and we certainly want relevant input from everybody. So, but it was kind of like when you have kind of an idea of where you wanted to head. We had the 4 options that we gave you, not that those are the only 4 options, but to not get too far down the road, and to give the zoning commission some feedback on some of the issues and some of the direction that comes from public input. And from that, we would take that information and fashion more of a little more dimension to the zoning districts and kind of the general feeling of where the zoning is going to head, by developing the 3 broad kind of sections of the zoning law, which would be typically are the use table, dimensions and density tables, if you have them, in whatever other kind of supplemental regulations that you feel you have gleaned from the comprehensive plan and public input. So the first public meeting was, kind of an introduction and kind of get a feel for where, how the community feels about some options. The second public hearing is when that's fleshed out a little more. And from that second public meeting, the idea was then the zoning commission, we would work with the zoning commission to flesh out more of the document so that it's more of a cover to cover kind of thing. And that after we have a first full draft, we would have another public meeting, not a public hearing, but just an informational kind of sharing public meeting, informal, so that we can find out how people feel about it. Again, before it's fully moving forward out of the zoning commission to the town board. So there would be input from the public at these three major milestones, which would lead to the zoning commission deciding how they wanted to use that information and making edits or changes as needed. And then there's actually 2 public hearings. This would be a public hearing that would be required by the zoning commission. And when the zoning commission has something in a final report that they want to send to the town board, actually the zoning commission ceases to be in existence, and then it falls on the town board's shoulders to take it from there. And the town board can change it or move forward with it. They would have to have a public hearing and then all of the other things that go along with adopting a local law. So that was kind of the philosophy behind those things that we had in our proposal. And I just tried fleshing that out a little more and taking some of the thoughts that were brought up at the meeting last month or the last time, 2 weeks ago, trying to flesh this out into a more detailed plan. So, here we are tonight thinking about how we're going to address public participation. But I think that, given that there's a lot of different opinions about the options and what could work and what should work, I still think that you need some more time to talk about the broad direction within the zoning commission before we have something to come back to show the public with. So I was thinking that our end of August meeting would still be to continue that discussion. And then be ready for in September. And in these timeframes, maybe that you'll need to push it off. I don't know. But the idea was that by September, we'll have some of that direction. Hopefully you will have a little bit of consensus about broadly, at least, that so the presentation, we would prepare a presentation. And I think that we can't just throw out, a map and say, here's our idea for a zoning scheme. We have to give the public some understanding of what zoning is, how it works. Some of the questions that you've asked, what does it mean in terms of, current land uses? What kinds of process might it be? Who would be administrating it? What does it mean for the town? So to put it into context and help educate the community on zoning, the zoning development process. And then to talk about, remember the first meeting or the second meeting, we talked about purpose statements to reflect the comprehensive plan. And so this is kind of a general feedback meeting, and we could develop a presentation in a PowerPoint kind of format that could be used in a number of ways. It could be recorded and put online for people to watch at their convenience, and then have the ability for people to write either email or in writing comments about it. We could have an in-person meeting, although I have to admit I'm a little concerned about how an in-person meeting would go. Well, it could be, I think you need to discuss that. It could be a hybrid, or it could be all online, where we would give a presentation. We could have an opportunity for people could use the chat. They could raise their hand and ask questions that we could talk about, or online or in person, there's ability to break up into smaller groups of people to have more detailed discussions, whether it be by location or by type of use, or however we want to break it up. So this first public meeting, I think needs to have some background that's kind of baked into how we start. And again, whether it's online or hybrid or in person, I really feel that there's my experience with these kinds of workshops are they have to be facilitated, and breaking a large group into smaller groups for smaller discussions, and then coming back to the larger group so that everyone still hears what is being discussed. But these meetings, zoning is very emotional. It's people have very strong feelings one way or the other about it. And these kinds of meetings can often get derailed by that kind of emotion. And so I'm not recommending, I'm not trying to get away from that. I'm just trying to have a meeting where everybody feels like they have had a chance to participate. And a lot of times when you have 40 people or 60 people or even 10 people sitting there, and it's kind of like, well, this is how I feel. It's really, it can be very difficult for some people who are not comfortable in a group setting to share how they really feel. But in a small group where you have 4, 5, 6 people sitting around a table, facilitated by someone who's there to listen and organize what they're saying, can be good. So there's a lot of decision making and a lot of thinking about what's the right approach, how are we going to do this, and all those little details of that. But that was what we were thinking would be for the first meeting. There's been concern raised multiple meetings about how do we reach the whole community. And my experience again is that there's no one way to meet the whole, to advertise these meetings with the whole community. So you have to do them all. It has to be a combination of something on the website, something in the newspaper, something in your newsletter. I personally like to mail every household something that says, this is what we're going to do. This is how you can participate. And then it's up to the people to whether they want to participate or not. But then we have made sure that everybody has the knowledge that it's taking place. So I have no idea what the town's budget is or the ability to do a new mailing like that just for this, but we can talk about that. So again, I don't know whether the schedule will work out this way, but I was thinking if that was in the beginning of September, then our second September meeting would be to review what people said and try and make sense about what the message was from the public. And then that will help you move forward with the decision about, do you want hamlet zoning districts? Do you want one zoning district that covers all the hamlets equally the same, or do you want them separated out? And based on that decision, I think, and I forget who it was that brought it up last meeting, but I think the idea to go to each hamlet area and talk to the people in those hamlets is a great idea. And although that was not part of what I contracted with the town to do, Rick and I are happy to help and facilitate that. And we can set you up with, kind of like a format and a facilitation procedure so that each meeting is conducted the same way with the same kind of questions to elicit, the same kind of process of responses. So I think that going out to specific locations is an excellent idea that could be facilitated by the zoning commission with some background work, maps, PowerPoint, or whatever else we can do for you from the consultant side. And then you guys have to digest all of that feedback that would influence some of the, or may influence some of the direction that you take on districts and uses, dimensions, or other development standards that you may choose to have in the zoning. And from the very beginning, the process for this was to take these first couple of months with the zoning commission and public input so that we all are on the same page about what you want to accomplish and generally how. And then it would be up to Rick and I to create a draft document for you that brings all those pieces together into the document. And then your job as a zoning commission would be to go section by section and talk about each one and make some decisions, edits or changes from that. So this public input is trying to get us with a framework so that when we go to write this local law, we know what we're doing. I mean, I could write it tomorrow, but that doesn't mean it would be appropriate for what you want and feel is appropriate for the town. So this would help give us a direction for you to start making some decisions on and guide us in the work that we have to do from the consultant side to pull it all together for you. So that's why at the end, number 7, I'm thinking like if we could do this by January, you would have more of a fleshed out document that you could react to specifically. It's not just this kind of philosophical discussion like we're having now, but it would be more specific. So those are some of the ideas that we had. I'm sure there are lots of ways to approach this, but it's a place to start. And so I turn it back to you for questions, comments, observations, changes, whatever you would like to do.
Thank you. I'm going to ask people on the zoning commission to kind of talk about what they'd like and ask questions. Bart?
Thank you. And thank you, Nan, for the document and for the great description of ideas about ways to gain public input and public participation. I'll just weigh in at this point that the timing of the public meeting, the first public meeting, may need to be later than early September. So just a note of realism that we should keep that in mind. I also was going to ask Mark what the timing of the next town newsletter is, because I do think that a direct mailing to all town residents would certainly be appropriate for this, but you mentioned perhaps doing a mailing outside of the town newsletter. So I'd like us to strongly consider a mailing among the ways that we're going to advertise this, but strongly would recommend a mailing to every household. More specifically, I'm not quite sure what public meeting number 1 referring to, doing it after draft zoning map or maps are developed by the zoning commission. And I wonder, the zoning commission so far has discussed 4 general scenarios, and we specifically requested examples of like zoning light, meaning like one big zone, to zoning heavy, which is lots of little districts or lots of little zones, within the town. And so I wonder if we might approach this as developing 2 general scenarios. And I don't know that there would be any of the 4 that already have been prepared, but developing 2 general scenarios to convey 2 things. One, to convey honestly that none of this is final, but also to convey that we're trying to present at least a couple of contrasting scenarios to elicit people's ideas and people's comments about which of the 2 general directions town residents might feel positively or negatively about, and help them articulate why they feel positively or negatively about the elements of those different contrasting scenarios. The other thing that I would suggest is that we or consultants take a stab at drafting a 1-pager, and I literally mean a 1-pager that would provide the background, the purpose, and the context for the zoning commission with links, specific, web links to all of the different, very rich information that's already on the zoning commission website, but people may not have known exists and have known to explore. And that one pager could be part of the mailing, or could be the one page in the newsletter if we go with the town newsletter. So it include kind of the background, purpose, context with links to website details and more information. But it would also include, in just general terms, a paragraph about the general protocol and rules for the meeting. So that people are not hearing the rules of the meeting or the protocol for the meeting and the expectations for time limits for speakers, or the expectations for interaction or small groups, or whatever it's going to be. So they're not hit with that right when they come to the meeting, and again, recognizing that not everybody is going to read that, but at least some people will have read that ahead of time and will have some sense of the protocol to expect when they participate in the public meeting.
Thank you. I'm going to go on and take more reactions, and then maybe Nan can respond to that, and also to some of the things that came up in the public comment, if we have time for that. So what do you got to say? And then I'll go to Michelle.
Okay, I was wondering about, I agree with everything you just said, it's great. The public meeting to be held after a kickoff meeting. What's the kickoff meeting to begin with?
The kickoff meeting was what we have already held as a zoning commission. That was kind of us getting our feet wet and organized together.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, but and it just says, and after the draft zoning maps are developed by the zoning commission. My belief is that we shouldn't develop any draft zoning maps before we have a public meeting. I believe it's this board's direction is to give the public the information that we have, that we're trying to decide about zoning maps and zoning scenarios as how we're going to do it, and then take the public opinion and then form our opinion from the public opinion and discuss it, and then come up with what we feel is the right way to go. I think myself personally, once again, I believe we need public opinion and public input before we make any decisions on draft zoning maps or our direction. And that's about it. I mean, I agree with the rest of this. Some of the stuff I don't, we could leave out. But I mean, you haven't got into a lot of this, so I mean, I don't have to say anything about it until we get further down the road.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Well, I guess some things that come to my mind is I feel like we need more time to just discuss these scenarios with amongst ourselves. And it may even be that we need to debate them amongst ourselves. I don't feel like we've really had a chance yet. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. It's just that this is how it's gone so far. We haven't had a chance to just ask questions or sort of put out ideas about what are our goals for zoning? What are we trying to protect or that? So I feel like we need more than just the August 24th meeting to figure that out. And I think I disagree a little bit about how everything has to be put out to the public right away, because I feel like with these public meetings, a lot of times it's just people that speak the loudest that get their opinion out, and that doesn't necessarily reflect what everybody thinks. And so I think we've sort of been given a responsibility to figure some things out and then put it out to get comments. But I guess I would worry about, I don't know. I think we need to have something to put out to the public that's a little bit more coherent than just, these are 4 possible scenarios. And I guess maybe I should stop there, but yeah, I guess I feel like I need more discussion to get a handle on what some of these possibilities are.
Thanks, Michelle.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure, absolutely.
the other thing that I would really like to say is that I don't believe that this can be just done online either.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that because it's one of the things I was going to talk about. So I think, I mean, everyone I'm sure has noticed that we've had a large increase in the number of COVID cases in the county. We were down to fewer than 10, and we now are at, we're as high as 90, and we're at 74 now. We have 10 people in the hospital. So the development of the Delta variant seems to have, hit the community, not as hard as many places in the South, but hard enough. You can have Zoom meetings where you have breakout rooms, and it's and that can work because I do that a lot in meetings, but I realize that it is not, the fact is that Zoom meetings, you miss a lot. You miss people's personal interaction, et cetera. But, I think we're all very concerned about public safety at this point as well. So we have to figure out how to do that in a manner that can work and where people feel comfortable. I very much liked what Barbara said about having a protocol and something that we send out to people that sort of describes what we're doing so that people are prepared for a meeting regardless of how it's held. I thought that really made a lot of sense. I do think people have to have something to react to so that when they say zoning, it's not just an amorphous word, but that it's something that says very clearly that this was driven by the comprehensive plan, that the comprehensive plan went through all this work, and that these are there are very clear things from the comprehensive plan that are trying to be preserved in the community and also thought about for the future of the community. And that how do you best go about doing that? Patrick, talked in public comment about how this is a very small community, and some of the things that are in zoning documents in very large communities, I agree. I don't think they make sense for a community our size. I keep wondering, driving around and looking at where houses are set and what the setbacks are. And I also think about the city of Ithaca's zoning. In the city of Ithaca, throughout the city of Ithaca, it says that the setback for the city should be 50 feet. So every time, which is insane because there is no 50-foot setbacks throughout the city. I mean, none of the houses are that. So that every time, if a house burnt down, for instance, in Fall Creek, you wouldn't, you'd have to get a variation, you'd have to get someone to approve you're putting the house back where it had been. And you think, like, why are you making rules that you can't follow? It just, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think as I drove down Buffalo Road to get here today, and, many of the houses, even in what I would almost call the hamlet, just over the bridge, have 15 to 20-foot setbacks. I'm not actually sure we need them, in any kind of way. I think that what we need to have is people need a general sense of what's an acceptable thing to do where they live. So, I always jokingly said, I think that means I would not like to have a nuclear power plant next to me, and I think that that's, something that we shouldn't have. I don't think we should have a large dry cleaning establishment because of the fact that they pollute. And we have water resources here that we want to protect. So for me, that's the things that, and I've heard many people on our zoning commission say that. What are we trying to protect? To me, that's water resources, the rural character of the community, a sense of place, of what is this place? And how do we manage to do that without making everyone crazy? And feeling that people are, making their lives more difficult than they have to be. So that's what I think we want to try to do and keep in with the what was driven in the comprehensive plan, which I think over those things. I feel very sad tonight. I forgot that Evie can't be here. She's on vacation in Maine. Ernie is still on vacation somewhere, and Val is somewhere where there are no electrons in order to connect him to us tonight. I know that I will be here for the next meeting in August. I will not be here for the first meeting in September, because I will be somewhere where there are also a scarcity of electrons. So I think as we think about this, I do very much want to have a public hearing as soon as we can and as soon as is safe. And as soon as we have something that we can present to people that they can react to. So I hear what you're saying about not having like a defined plan. But I think if people don't have something to like grasp, I'm not sure what they'll have to say. And that's just comes from too many years of running meetings. Michelle?
Well, I guess I agree with everything you said, Jean. Although the thing about setbacks, isn't that like more site plan review? I mean, is that actually zoning?
Yeah,
That is
setbacks are in zoning. Setbacks.
that
are
is zoning.
Backyards
Okay.
in some zoning.
Well,
Not in
I
every
agree. That seems pretty detailed for a town like Caroline, but I do think, to your point, let's say, I don't want my neighbor to sell their property and put in a dry cleaning facility, for example. That would totally destroy my property values.
Right.
So things like that. But I guess, do we even know how we all feel like what our goals are? And that's what I'm just wondering, do you think we can accomplish that in the next meeting? Or is it going to take?
Let me just interject, is that those timeframes were really, really just trying to stay on target with the time frame that was set up when I was first hired to do this. There's nothing set in stone. You have a moratorium in place, and we're trying to get this done so that we meet those needs. So I don't want to overstress people by saying the first meeting in September has to be this. It was simply that was what was to stay on target. I totally agree that there hasn't been a lot of detailed discussion. And I totally agree that the public will do better to react to something than this amorphous whatever. But I don't get hung up over that it has to be the first meeting in September. That was just, looking at the original time frame we set up and trying to stick to it. But that's up to all of you to determine in terms of the time frame. I think, and you have to feel like you're ready for it. And the only one thing I would urge you to think about this first meeting is not as a public hearing. A public hearing is of something very different than a public meeting or a public forum. So let's try and not call this a public hearing, because we are not in any shape ready for a formal public hearing. This is a public forum.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm going to suggest is that at the next meeting, we review a couple of things. One is what we had set out as purposes, and we had written those purposes out. And I think it would be a good option to, just review those purposes, because that's the purposes. In other words, not sure it's exactly the goals, but I think if we review those purposes and then look at what our own individual goals are and what we're hearing when we look at the comprehensive plan and what we think comes from the comprehensive plan as to goals, they should align with the purposes, right? Okay, so that would make a lot of sense, I think, for us to approach it from that direction. And then to answer some of the questions which I have heard that have come up tonight. So for instance, Ellen Harrison's questions about the industrial zone and the commercial zone. I don't think that our consultants are saying we have to have those. I think they were saying these are the kinds of zones you can have. Mr. Goodrich's question about the DEC. Nan talked a little bit about that at the last meeting, but I think you might want to prepare a more specific answer for that so that we would really understand what you're saying that zoning will do about water that isn't done by the 60 other agencies. And I have to say, Mr. Goodrich, I spent a lot of years in my life trying to get the creek, the 6 Mile Creek, as it comes into the lake, dredged. And I could not believe how many agencies had their hands in that and could not agree on anything. It was And so that is not dredged yet. It hasn't been dredged for over 25 years now. And we're very likely to have an extremely large flood sometime in the city of Ithaca because of that. Because it's of, all these agencies beating each other up and not agreeing.
Tim is.
Tim, I see your hand. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm still sitting here thinking about the calendar that we have. And that we do remain as a town somewhat under pressure to keep end sites of moratoriums in mind. And I guess one of the things that I would encourage you all is to try not to repeat steps that you've already taken. I think that we spent 2 months talking about the purposes and settling on them. So I think what I would try to encourage you to do is maybe to walk systematically through the 4 maps that Nan provided, and that would give you some really, really concrete parameters to discuss a lot of things that you can. I think that would help probably keep you moving forward.
And I would think you mean the zoning maps and the overlays. Is that what you're speaking of? Okay, I think we actually have to look at those, and I'm hopeful. I think what for me would be very useful is to see if we could have some of those maps printed in a larger format and have them left at the town clerk so that we could look at them.
That'd be great.
Because it could be me, but I'm having a hard time distinguishing where some things are on those overlays. So we'll talk about that later and see if we can get that done. I don't want to, Tim, walk back through all the purposes, but I want people to look at those before we get to the meeting and then see if there is something that's about our goals that are different than what we're saying about the purposes.
Tim, isn't there, after we amended the moratorium, a clause in there that we could extend it again?
Can you imagine, Bruce, if we tried to do that?
Well, I thought it did say something like.
Well, no, there is flexibility, but I think ideally the board would prefer not to do that if possible for many, many different reasons.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in, the language of that current moratorium allows for terminating the moratorium should we finish earlier
Right.
than the termination date,
And the termination date is
August
next,
2022.
so next August, so a year from now.
Okay, because the town lawyer did say that it would take us 2 years to do this zoning.
We're gonna make him a liar, though. Okay, so I would hope that we will have our first public meeting sometime in October would be my goal. I think that we'll have the chance to do what we're trying to do and meet sometime in October. God willing, and the creek don't rise, Speaking of which, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, building on what Tim said, we've had a smattering of individuals talk about they like more detailed or they want less detailed or they, so we haven't really gone through a discussion about the overlays, what the overlays could accomplish and what the different zoning options could accomplish. And I think that what could help organize everyone's thoughts is to talk about the pluses and the minuses of each of those options so that you have something to weigh. I mean, because sometimes even though there's nothing perfect that we're going to come up with, but some options may have more positives than negatives. So I think if we start, if the zoning commission members can start looking at, and I could also give what I think are positives and negatives, but I think you all should be thinking about what are the questions that you have related to each? What are the positives? Like when you look at it, what do you say? Oh, I don't like that because of X, or I think that could be helpful because of Y. And we start having a more, like Tim suggested, which is an excellent suggestion, a map by map discussion. And we may find that none of those options are really where you want to go, or we may find that there's pieces of options that will come together to create a new option that takes kind of the best of the positives and the fewest number of negatives. That would be my suggestion. And I certainly, we can arrange to have those maps printed and sent to the town, so that's not an issue.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That would be very helpful.
Jeannie, am I allowed to just make one point, please?
I'm really trying to resist to doing that since our last meeting got really off track. I'll give you 30 seconds.
That's enough. I think the discussion about whether to have meetings earlier, sooner rather than later, based upon having something to put out there for people to react to. I think the first thing for people to react to is, do we want zoning at all? And I think that Tim was, or rather Bruce was, alluding to that a little bit. I'll be more specific about it. Well, you're shaking your head, but I think that that is a legitimate question to ask.
Well,
So
I agree. Thank you.
that's my.
What I'm going to say that I agree to is, I think it's a legitimate question to ask. I almost think it was answered by the fact that we produced a comprehensive plan. And that everyone working on that knew that this was where it was heading. And I think people knew that too, but we'll see how that goes. I also, before we end this meeting though, I want to ask a couple of questions that I think have come up, and I think we may have time for the people who are going to be joining the zoning commission, who are Will and Patrick and Bill. Is there anyone else? Jonathan.
Jonathan.
I'm not sure if Jonathan's here tonight or not.
No, I don't.
If you have anything that Patrick, you spoke about your ideas in the public forum part. Bill?
Yes.
So as we're talking about the next meeting, is there anything you'd like to suggest that we think about and plan for?
I like sort of where things have wound up here. I think Barb's suggestion of developing 2 or maybe it'll be 3 scenarios that wind up at the first public meeting is excellent, because again, as we've all talked about, if you present just one, it's like, oh, here's where we're at, and the public understandably feels, oh my God, we're being railroaded, all decisions are made. So having something that gives some range of options out there, reinforces the fact that it's fluid, that it's not set in stone. So I think that was an excellent suggestion. And I agree with it, that's what we should do next meeting, is work through the maps, just as Nan and Tim has suggested. What do we like? What don't we like? What would we modify? And from that, then maybe be able to develop the 2, or maybe it'll be 3 maps that would go out for public review. So as far as the next meeting, that's what I would say. I have thoughts about mailings and public process and everything else, and I'll put some of that in writing rather than probably taking your time up now, but yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to actually send out something to everyone on the committee asking about suggestions for how to reach the public.
Yeah.
Yes?
I was just going to state it. We did have a comprehensive plan for multiple years before this comprehensive, and it's very similar to the one we have right now. Next thing is when I was on the planning board and we did meetings and we were trying to, the public cafes we had were very good meetings because we broke up into little groups.
Yep.
It worked out really well.
I hope we can have those again.
Could I add,
Sure.
sorry, 2 ideas for the public participation?
Yes?
I think in addition to public hearings, which I think are an excellent platform, maybe the town could plan to kind of go where people are absent the town. So whether it's parents dropping off or picking up kids at school, doing something at a farmer's market or other community events to reach people, or putting up drop boxes near higher density parts of the town. And my other idea would be to go into the public hearing or public idea gathering activities with a keen understanding of what the town's demographics are. I pulled up some census data before this meeting and saw, for instance, that we're about 60% owners, 40% renters. About 30% of the town is under the age of 19, and youth voices haven't really had a chance to be heard in this scenario. We have a pretty even split of income ranges, but making sure that kind of all income levels are heard. So those are my 2.
Thank you. Very helpful. Wilma, is Will on call? I wasn't positive.
I don't think so.
I thought I saw her name earlier on, but My,
She, I saw her name there too, but she called me earlier, said she's having trouble getting in, but then I saw that she was in. And so I don't know what's gone wrong or not from her end,
Yeah,
so.
I'm not finding her.
she may have had to drop out. So I'm going to go over what I'm hearing us say that for the next meeting. I would like people just to review the purposes, just to read them again for themselves. And if there's a goal that they don't think is kind of listed there, please bring that to the meeting and we'll have a bit of a discussion about that. We will have the maps prepared and at the clerk's office, I'm assuming. Okay, and that people can go and look at those. I would think by a week from now, those should be there probably, and then people can have a week to look at them. I love the idea of looking at the maps and then writing down what are your questions and on the overlays and how those overlays would work with this. I guess one of the things I don't understand is there an overlay that is more important than another overlay? Is there a hierarchy within the overlays? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a question I just started thinking about the other night and I didn't really understand it. So I think that's something I'd like to have an overall question about. And having us walk systematically through the maps at the next meeting, I think would make a lot of sense. Also, I will send out something to people saying, how are the best ways to meet people? We have a couple of places in town where people do gather, the Brookton Market, the fire halls, to some extent. We have some churches where we could leave information and get things out to people. I like the idea about the drop boxes. I think for the comprehensive plan meetings, the big signs for me worked. It's what I saw and made me come and look at them. So there was, a sign on Route 79, there was a sign down in Brooktondale, there were probably signs in Slaterville that people saw. I think, large signs work. On the other hand, my husband never saw them, which I found troubling since he was driving most of the time. I was like, you didn't see those signs, okay.
He's paying attention.
Yeah.
Gina, let me jump in because I'm the one that made those signs and I made them as big as I bloody well thought I could, and they were too small. So, and I noticed myself that, oh my God, I know I just drive by one of my signs because I put it up and I didn't see it. Realistically, the sign in front of the Brookendale Fire Hall announcing the pancake breakfast, that's the size that's needed. And maybe it's time for the town to invest in one, at least in front of the town hall. And maybe we can put some temporary ones elsewhere, but they really have to be huge to be seen. It's incredible.
But there you are. Okay. I would like to think, I think one of the things that I will do is look through this and try to put some other possible dates on here of what I think might work. For instance, if we had this public hearing on the first, not the public hearing, a public meeting, not a public hearing, I keep saying that, a public meeting on the first meeting in October, that would be October 12th, I think. I think that's the second Tuesday in October. I did that by making my own little calendar on a piece of paper here. And, but it would be in that time frame anyway. And I think that's a reasonable time of year. We're not likely to have a lot of snow on the ground yet, and people are past the going back to school stage. And if we have, if we manage to get past this Delta variant, we might be able to have some meetings. I also very much like the idea of having the smaller gatherings that Bruce just suggested, either for the hamlets and having one in several of the hamlets. I think that could be really useful, or just having meetings at places like the Brookendale Market or a fire hall or a church that people could feel free to drop in at and have just a conversation. If we have to use Zoom, we'll just have to figure out how to do that with the Zoom rooms. I did want to say there is, because Nan had asked, were there graduate students or people who could help? There is something in the community. Susan Christopherson was a faculty member at Cornell in planning who died several years ago and left money to establish a way for Cornell to assist the community in terms of planning and to use students and others to participate in that way. They have an office at the new History Center downtown. And I think that would be a perfect opportunity because they use people who are in the community as well as people who are at school at Cornell and others. And so I think I'd be happy to be in touch with them and see if that was possible. So, so there would be people who have an experience in this and also are rooted in the community. So she was a wonderful woman and it was a wonderful way of her to leave money to our community. I think that.
Jean, can I just interject something here?
Sure.
I just thought about it as in another community where they were kind of, they're not doing zoning, but they're doing a comprehensive plan and having similar issues with COVID and how to engage the public. And one of the things that we're doing there, which you could add to your list of possibilities, is instead of a public meeting where people come and, you know, sit in a group in a big room, that we could do a series of open houses where you have an evening or an afternoon, you say come between, you know, 6 and 8 or 5 and whatever. And we have a series of maps and just a couple people from the zoning commission or however we do that, where people can walk through, they can look at the maps, they can ask questions, they can offer their comments, and they don't have to sit through with a big group. I mean, so I guess I'm throwing in the idea of that an open house kind of format could be something that people would be willing or maybe feel better about coming to if we advertise it that way. You can get really good feedback that way. And it could be more one-on-one. You know, you have someone standing there at the map and someone says, well, you know, how does this work? Or what does this mean? And so, you know, it would have to have some good organization, but an open house idea might be something to throw in the mix to consider.
I like that idea, and I've actually done one of those when we were doing a strategic plan for our bus system here, TCAT, and it worked incredibly well. We had 6 stations with various things at them, like set up on easels, and a consultant staffer person who took notes, and we had sticky notes, and people just wrote their ideas on sticky notes and stuck them on things. We got a lot of good feedback from that, and people were able to come in for 15 minutes even and just do something.
Right. Right. And yeah, you can get excellent feedback from that. And it's, you know, you could repeat it in different locations. And, you know, some people might not have 2 hours to sit in a meeting, but they'd have a half an hour to come to the firehouse and kind of see what's going on and offer their comments and maybe have a little more one-on-one opportunity to learn about why we're doing this and what it all means and to express themselves. At least as, you know, we could have a card that you could hand out. If you want to learn more about this, here's the website. Here's where you can send in comments or whatever. So I think there could be some traction with that method.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Good. The other possibility is before such a meeting like that or a series of those open houses, you could have a PowerPoint posted and tell people, you know, look at this PowerPoint and you'll learn something. And this is the kind of thing you're going to react to.
Right.
So that there'd be some information, just like the protocol thing that you suggested as well. Okay. I feel like we're almost out of time, or we actually have 10 minutes left. Is there anything else somebody wants to talk about this evening?
I've got a brief statement I'd like to make if I could.
Sure.
This is relevant for the ones who are there, you know, in person, the public participating as well. because a gentleman at the last meeting brought up the idea of, geez, can't the town vote on whether to have zoning or not? And of course, Mr. Hoyt brought up a question of whether the town really wants zoning. Isn't that the first question to answer? And having worked long and extensively on the comprehensive plan, I know there are people who have strong opinions there shouldn't be zoning in the town. I know there are people who have strong opinions there should be zoning in the town. And I know there are people who have mild opinions either way. And our assessment as the planning board of the comments and feedback, et cetera, we got at all kinds of workshops was that the bulk of the opinion was in favor of zoning. We could be wrong. And so for Mr. Hoyt and the others, there's a golden opportunity to prove that, which is, given the timing of things, there is an election for the town board coming up in November. And if we got it wrong, then vote out the people who are in favor of zoning and voting people who don't want it. So there is not a direct vote. New York State does not have ballot initiatives, but fortuitously, we're going to have an election between now and then. And I firmly believe, based on what I've heard in the town, that the majority of the opinion is in favor of the town establishing zoning. Once the zoning commission was established, that is their job, is to come up with the zoning plan. So the zoning commission actually shouldn't be considering the question of should there be zoning or not. They come up with the zoning plan, the town can yell and scream, and then it'll get voted down by the town board if enough people say, we really don't want this. But it's not really the zoning commission's job to figure out whether or not there should be zoning. The job of the zoning commission is to come up with the zoning plan. It is then the job of the town members to give feedback whether they like it, hate it, want it, don't want it, and the job of the town board to vote to approve or disapprove the zoning. So like I say, there's at least that one chance to vote in the town board members you want to have. And I think that for better or worse, but I really think that the town is in favor of zoning, but I do know there are people who are not, and we should get all opinions in about what the best form of zoning for Caroline would be. But I did want to make that clear that, that's the stage we're at. And again, I'm happy to be proved wrong that really the vast majority of the town doesn't want zoning. Prove me wrong, but that's not my reading. And I think, Bruce, that there's been an evolution in the town since the 10 years ago, and certainly when the first comp plan was written, the town has come a vast distance in terms of their thoughts and thinking and desires for planning since that time. And even since the time I think that you were working on the workshops for the first iteration of corrections, changes to the comp plan. So I think there's been an evolution in the town, and we'll see where it goes from here. But again, I think that the November election will definitely be a very good bellwether of what to do. And then, Jean, if you can stand quickly at the end of the meeting, I'd appreciate it.
I agree with most of what you said, except for I was on the planning board, and it was my opinion that it was maybe 50-50 on the planning board as to whether they wanted zoning or not. And we developed the plan and handed it to you, and it took you 2 more years to develop the rest of the way. So I don't know how you got that the majority is for zoning.
Counting is always difficult.
I think it's a major challenge, and actually that'll be, I'm going to write some comments to the zoning commission. I think finding out what people really want is incredibly difficult and challenging. There's no really good way to do it. So you try everything. I agree that it's difficult to know, and it was just based on stuff you didn't see, Bruce, because we had our own workshops, and I'm just evaluating the feedback at those. But yeah, I could be wrong, like I said.
Mark?
Well, I'm just going to say that the survey that we handed out, we went through exactly what was written up on the comprehensive plan of what people wanted and everything else, and nowhere in there did it say anything about zoning.
Okay, Mark.
Let me just, though, I think the other thing that I'd like to say to that is that zoning, people have a picture that comes to their mind when they hear the word zoning. And a lot of times in rural areas, the picture that they get is not a good one, because they're thinking of zoning that you might see in an urban area, or zoning in a rural area that really isn't appropriate for a rural area. And unfortunately, what has happened is that a community adopts zoning and the next community says, oh, hey, that's good, let's copy that. And then, so zoning gets a bad rap because it's often the wrong zoning. And so I think that's very hard to overcome. It's very zoning as, you know, a very bad thing. Taking away property rights is ingrained in a lot of people, even though I believe that if it's the right zoning, it doesn't do that. And so I think we have to keep that in mind, that we want to hear everybody's opinion, but we also have to help folks understand what we're trying to do is come up with the right zoning for your town. It's going to look something totally different than all of the towns around you. So it doesn't have to be a bad word. It's something that it's really just a tool. It's just another tool to help meet your goals. And everyone goes back to what are we trying to protect? What are we trying to protect? The comprehensive plan talked about what we're trying to protect. Long term, as things move forward over the next 10, 20 years, that is ultimately where you have to keep thinking. Zoning is not an instantaneous tool. It looks at, well, how are we going to have things that can help protect these things over time? So I guess I just wanted to throw out that, is Dryden's zoning right for Caroline? Maybe not. But that's what people have in mind when they think zoning. So I think we need to approach this is that we have a bunch of goals in the town that we want to accomplish as a community. Zoning is one tool that we can use to do it. And how can we develop that tool that fits you, that people are comfortable with? So I think that's the approach, that when we go to the public, that, we're not trying to shove someone else's zoning on you. We're trying to develop something that will work for you. And that's the approach I think we should take.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to see if there are any more questions, and if not, Mark, oh yes, I forgot, I totally forgot that you had your hand up.
Make it quick. I just want to make a couple comments. Yes, we can accommodate the newsletter. It's the last one was sent July 1. So we have some flexibility, and so we'll definitely work with you to do that.
Great.
If you wanted to send out a postcard, we could do that too. We have a great mailing list and can do that. And then I just wanted to briefly address the concern about the timeline. When we did adopt the moratorium, we didn't pull that number out of the air. That was 14 months. That was what Guy recommended, as he said, that this is what I can responsibly recommend. So I'm just offering that so that the zoning commission doesn't adopt a defeatist attitude about the reasonableness of this timeline. I think it's doable. So that's.
I think it is true, because I don't personally want this to be my life's work. The first thing mentioned in my obituary, Jean served on the zoning commission for 32 years. Yeah.
And the other thing I'll just say is, Zoom is not the same as in person, but the breakout rooms work great.
They do.
They do. So.
If you only have 6 people or so in a breakout room, it's just like being at lunch at a table, which is kind of nice. Yeah. Okay. Would someone like to call for an adjournment? Excellently done. We are adjourning. I will see you all in 2 weeks, and be safe out there, as they say. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Jean, can you hear me still?
I can.
I just want to check that you got I sent